kukaya uko. Unipokere, I'm now on my way. Coming ready. It's been a long time since I left her. I wanna know how my girl is. Kamsunga matahe kalikuti intombi yami injani intombi yami. Oh kukaya uko. Unipokere. 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 Unipokere. We Chuchu Tawonga. In the highlands where the river flows right into the lake, there, up in those highlands, there lived Tawonga. Tawonga was so beautiful. Have you ever heard of the Nkhonjera? The Nkhonjera falls plunging into a beautiful waterfall in Nkhonjera in Rumpi district. It's called Nkhonjera Falls. Tawonga was more mesmerizing than Nkhonjera Falls. Have you ever heard of Lake Malawi? Have you ever seen Lake Malawi from the plateau called Kondowe, Livingstonia Plateau? Tawonga was more mesmerizing than the blue of Lake Malawi. She was so beautiful that every man wanted to marry her. But Tawonga was also proud. Not only was she beautiful, she was also proud. Every man that wanted to marry her, Tawonga had a little game that she wanted to play with him. Say for example, Ashe wanted to marry Tawonga. Tawonga would look at Ashe. You wear too much white. Maybe try black. But Tawonga would not have any of these men. She eventually got tired of all this unwarranted and unwanted stress of men popping up from everywhere and nowhere asking for her hand in marriage. So she decided she was going to give them impossible tasks if they really truly wanted her hand in marriage. There was a king from the land of the marshes with a lavish proposal befitting any princess, but Tawonga laughed at him. I'm not any princess. I'm no regular princess, she said, and challenged him. If you truly want to marry me, go back and live underwater for 2 weeks and then come back. I'll happily marry you. Well, the king raced back to his home and jumped straight into the marshes. Unfortunately, he died in less than 2 minutes. And there was a prince who came from the hills of the sunset with riches, boatfuls of riches, and said, I have only brought a handful of my riches for you, beautiful Tawonga. Tawonga said, oh, I'm offended that you only brought a handful, that you think a handful is enough for me. Oh, no, that's not what I meant, the prince said. In that case, you don't mind if I take the handful and not marry you? And so the prince went back empty-handed. This went on for some time. Rich traders, poets, drunkards, billionaires, agriculturists came, but all of them failed. This went on, till one day, all the eligible men in the village tried their luck and failed. And the rest, they couldn't muster the courage to try at all. One day, a hyena who was walking around the king's compound, he went in and said, okay, I will try my luck. He asked for Tawonga's hand in marriage. Tawonga thought it was quite a hilarious joke, but hyena was rather serious. He wished to marry Tawonga. What a laugh. What fun I will have teasing this hyena, she thought to herself. Maybe I can ask him to walk on twos for a whole week. Maybe I can ask him to cut off his ears. Wait, I know. Listen, hyena. If you want to marry me, you have to go and do something for me. Hyena says, what? Anything, my princess, I'll do it. Enthusiastically, he said, cut off your tail. Cut off your tail and I'll marry you. With such an ugly little tail, cut it off. Hyena's enthusiasm ebbed away, but determined to marry the princess, he returned to his cave, took a sharp panga knife, turned towards his tail, and grabbed his tail. Can you all be hyenas for me a little bit? Grab your tail, and then hack it. Ga! Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. So if I say ga, can you respond for me? Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. Can we go? Hyena, ga, kangara we, chichirere, ga, kangara we, chichirere, ga, kangara we, chichirere, kangara. It was too painful, but hyena really wanted to marry the princess in her beautiful green dress. Ga, kangara we, chichirere, kangara. Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. Hyena failed. He went back and slunk into his little cave. His tail hurt from all the hacking. And the princess laughed and saw him walking away. A few days passed and the princess was walking, minding her own business, absent-minded, until she got to the edge of the cliff. And without seeing, she fell over the cliff. Fortunately, she held on to a branch that was jutting out of the cliff, and she held on for dear life. Hyena was walking, minding his own business, and he heard a tiny soft voice. Help! 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 And Hyena went there and found the princess holding on for dear life. Please, Hyena, can you please go and grab a rope, anything, and or string, please put it down and help me, I'm going to die. Hyena says, I don't think you can manage to hold on for me to go and get a rope and come back. Here, hold on to my tail, and I'll pull you up. And it was the tail which he had just been hacking. The princess held on to the tail. Ga! Wee! Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. Ga! Wee! Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. And the princess was saved by hyena's tail, which she had originally wanted to be hacked off. Ga! Wee! Kangara we, chichirere, kangara. Ga! Wee! Kangara we, chichirere, kangara.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Kweza. My name is Maya Kachala, and I am part of the Kweza team. And Kweza is a creative hub and home for artists and all things art. Tonight, we are here for the official book launch of Chuchu and Other Stories by Tawonga, Taddja, Nkhonjera. Here at Kweza, we believe in the preservation of our culture and our Malawian stories. And we believe one way to do this is through writing and storytelling. And so Chuchu is a collection of 10 stories from across Malawi. And it is the second book of a projected 10-book series, following up on the first book, He Helide and Other Stories. So I'm here to give you the layout of the land. To my left is Uka, a coffee shop. They have varieties of drinks and coffees and snacks and foods. Please feel free to go ahead and buy from them. And also to my left, to the further left, are our bathrooms here at Kweza. So I'm going to leave the floor to Tawonga to take us through the night, but otherwise, welcome and enjoy.
Thank you very much, Maya. One more time, I would really start by saying thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I don't take this for granted. For so many reasons, I'm very grateful for this evening. My dear friend Q understands why. And I would like to say thank you very much for everyone and everything that's happening tonight. We believe in stories. We believe in the story of life. My niece asked me one day, she said, "Uncle, why do you write these children's books?" And my initial reaction, I wanted to say, it's not a children's book. But I guess if she thinks it's a children's book, then it is a children's book. But when I'm writing, I'm not thinking of children only. Sometimes I don't know what I'm writing. I go and do research. When I do the research, I find these stories. These are not original stories. These are stories that have, stood the test of time. But they are told differently. They are told with particular interest regarding the culture that you come from. So you might hear the same story, Kajitsa, told in Rumpi among the Tumbuka. It might not be the same story that you will hear in Sanje among the Sena, even though the title is the same, the theme is the same. So I thought, I'm a creative, I'm a writer. How can you explain a tortoise beating a hare in a foot race? And so I thought, let me try and explain that. And so when I wrote that, that was the first story that came into this second book, Chuchu. Fulu Ndi Kalulu. When I wrote that, I remembered one thing. People relate folk tales to the olden days, where we've got arrows and spears and this. And so I thought, if we're writing folk tales and we're in 2024, what do people want to talk about? And so I thought about agriculture. And I thought, okay, so what about agriculture? Permaculture. Okay, so Chuchu is a permaculturalist. And I thought about medicine. Somebody said, not somebody, let me be a bit more respectful and say Margaret Mead, who is supposedly the mother of anthropology. She said the first sign of culture, according to her, was a healed bone. So if you got a broken bone in the bush, you're not the fittest, so you won't survive. But if you can have medicine and fix that bone, that shows culture. And so I decided these stories, we're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about agriculture, they're going to talk about money, they're going to talk about medicine, they're going to talk about current day Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and things that concern us today. So when I started writing, I first wrote He Helide and Other Stories. He Helide and Other Stories is 10 stories. These stories, we had done a project under the same title, He Helide and Other. It's a collection of 10 songs that I produced and recorded with my partner and music friend Muhanya. Muhanya is currently in Germany, and studying music and also composing still. So we did this book, and I got the idea to do 10 of this type of books. After 10 books, we would have collected 100 folk tales, and we've preserved them in book form. And the beauty about books today is you can have audiobooks, and you can have visual books, and you can even have them online. You can have hard copies. So we feel like by 10 books, we would have collected the 100 stories, each one unique in its own way, and we would have done our part to have preserved Malawian culture. And so, thank you. So we are going to welcome a good friend of mine to read for us the title story, Chuchu. Ladies and gentlemen, I met this friend like a miracle, like an angel almost, because it was going to be overwhelming for me today. A lot happened, like I explained, and he told me, don't worry, I'll go pick up the books, I can do it. I was supposed to pick up the books, but I was unable to. And he went. This guy knows me only maybe 4 days, and he's doing me favors and helpful and this and that. And he said, yes, I'll read. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to say all the way from Ethiopia, because this is Kweza, all the way from 4th seat to my left at Kweza. A hand for Ashenafi, ladies and gentlemen. In white.
Good evening. I will not promise that I will be even halfway the way he read the stories. I'll try my best. Based on what I've just learned, how he did it, I'll try to do something like that, but don't expect too much. Chuchu. Chuchu did everything backwards. For one, he planted seeds when everyone else harvested. One year, the village suffered a bad harvest. Chuchu, however, had planted in his own time, and he ended up reaping a bountiful crop. That was just a fool's luck, said some wise beings in the village. Chuchu, being of simple needs, and finding himself with more food than he could eat, shared his food with those who didn't have. So Chuchu was loved, but almost as if only at an arm's length. He was just slightly odd, with his eccentric ways, baffling many and making them trust him less. Chuchu did everything backwards. He helped and healed hurt animals. As a child, Chuchu would often get in trouble for helping trapped animals escape from their snares. Amongst his friends, Chuchu failed to fit in. He had totally different interests. One day, while at play, one team was a player short. Someone suggested, let's go and call Chuchu to join us and play. They agreed and went to the hut, but they didn't find him there. So they called, "Wee, Chuchu, wee! Wee, Chuchu, wee! Kasi uli kochi." But Chuchu didn't respond. They went and searched in the garden, but even there they didn't find him. They called again, "Wee, Chuchu, wee! Kasi uli kochi." Once again, Chuchu didn't respond. They looked everywhere without finding him, and at dusk, just before the sun's last ray was about to set, one boy screamed, "Chuchu!" And And there was Chuchu, sprawled on all fours, belly to the ground, gazing intently where the river swelled into the banks, watching the tadpoles with unwavering attention. "What are you doing, Chuchu?" asked the boy. "I'm watching the tadpoles." "Why?" asked another boy, confused as to why anyone would spend the entire day watching tadpoles. "Why? I want to know what happens to the tail when the tadpole turns into a frog, of course." And then finding that a good enough answer, Chuchu got up, dusted himself and said, "Well, let's go then. I can't see much in the dark. I'll just have to come again tomorrow to find out." The other boys looked at each other in bewilderment and followed Chuchu silently back to the village. When Chuchu didn't go do things backwards, he did them all at once. There was one planting season. Chuchu kept licking his finger, pointing it towards the sky, smelling the air and shaking his head. Everyone looked at him in wonderment. Naturally, everyone in the village had the sense to plant maize in their fields. That's what everyone ate. So that's what everyone planted, maize seeds. Chuchu instead planted stems in the soil, cassava stems. As if that was not contrary enough, Chuchu then went ahead and planted peas, beans, and groundnuts all at once, in all his gardens and all other deserted land that he could find. To confirm that he was indeed going mad, Chuchu would go to every household in the village every morning and politely ask for cow dung and goat droppings. And where they had chickens, ducks, and guinea fowl, even the droppings of the poultry. "He's finally gone insane," they said as they planted maize seeds. That season, strange worms emerged from nowhere, and their favorite food was maize stalks. They ate all the maize, besieging every garden like a trained army, so the people called them army worms. Somehow, these army worms had no appetite for cassava, nor did they have any appetite for beans, peas, and groundnuts. Chuchu's farms were spared, and the crop flourished. At time of yield, Chuchu harvested plenty of cassava tubers, pods and pods of beans and peas, and groundnuts. Chuchu also planted lots of trees bearing fruit. He had learned how to grow naturally existing fruit trees through a process called grafting, and so Chuchu had a bumper harvest. As usual, having more food than his simple self needed, Chuchu opened his home to everyone who had no food due to the army worm's attack. Families were fed from Chuchu's harvest. Grooms found themselves brides, offering Chuchu's harvest as bride price. And yet Chuchu himself, despite having passed the marrying age, remained unmarried. So his friends sang, "Way Chuchu way! Wena banyako! Bali kutora! Iwe uchali mumpara!" Still, Chuchu remained unmarried, despite his progressive prosperity. It's not that Chuchu didn't have a heart. He did. It's not that Chuchu didn't fall in love. He did. He had fallen in love with the king's daughter, back when they were both teens. Nobody remembered the story. The princess, the king's daughter, had severally been burnt in a fire accident, and every one of the king's medicine men had pronounced her beyond saving. Chuchu believed in his heart that he could save the princess. All he needed was a chance. He had a special reason for the princess to survive her burns and get better. He loved her. Yet, he knew no way to get an audience with the king. One morning, Chuchu went to his father and told him that he could save the princess. Chuchu's father did not like the idea of his son meddling around with the princess's health using his backward ideas and methods. She was the king's daughter. If anything went wrong, the kid would never forgive Chuchu and his whole family. Nevertheless, acknowledging that despite his unconventional ways, Chuchu seemed to somehow always get things right, Chuchu's father acceded, went to the king and asked for permission to let his son try and save the princess. After all, everyone else had failed. Chuchu's father asked Chuchu to make certain not to fail, for the consequences from the king would be unbearable. Some time back, Chuchu had grown an inedible, spiky plant with sharp thorns along the leaves. It turned green when ripe and had a horribly bitter taste. It's not food, Chuchu had said when others tried to eat it. It's a miracle plant. It has healing powers, Chuchu had said, to the disbelief of all. Chuchu cut off the succulent green leaves and sliced them in half, pressing out all the sap that was between the leaves into a balm. Chuchu collected enough balm, and when evening came, he applied the balm all over the princess's body, for the fire had not spared any part of it. Chuchu doughtily attended to the princess, cleaning her wounds, patching them up with extra balm, and making sure she was drinking enough water. After a long fortnight's wait, the princess woke up with a start, as good as new. The only reminder of her burns, a variegated skin, which if anyone cared to look closely, only added to her beauty. Chuchu cared to look closely and fell irredeemably in love once more. But Chuchu knew his place as a commoner, unbefitting of the love of a princess. So he kept his feelings where no one would ever find out, to himself. He ignored all the quiddish giggles of other girls who liked him only for his positions. He silently loved the princess deep in his heart and went on with his life alone. A period of tranquil ensued. However, it did not last. Soon, terror gripped the people. An unknown predator had besieged the village with relentless attacks. The predator was far too cunning and wily to be traced and caught. It ravaged homes and killed all the livestock, goats, cattle, sheep, guinea fowl, and all. Hunters set up traps to catch it, but the predator would still find a way to kill the livestock without detection. The chief called for the villagers to set up a night's vigil to catch the predator and kill it, but it did not show up that night. Instead, it sauntered into the village the following morning when they were all tired and attacked a female goat, carrying it away. When the villagers were set pursuit, the predator raced away and climbed the impossible to climb tree. No one in the village had ever been able to climb the tree. The villagers set camp at the foot of the tree, hoping that the predator would sometime come down, but it didn't. Days passed, and people began giving up and leaving the camp at the impossible to climb tree. Slowly, they forgot about the predator, but soon it struck again, this time killing all the animals in the village, except those in the king's compound. The king was now worried. He demanded that the predator be killed by all means necessary, but nobody had any means at all. All the hunters and soldiers failed. The king besieged the wise, gray-haired men in the village, but their wisdom failed them. In desperation, the king decreed that he would give half the kingdom to anyone who would kill the predator. Everyone who came and tried miserably failed. All this time, Chuchu mulled over the terror of the predator. Why had it evaded capture thus far? Why did it elude every trap set against it? How were they going to kill it if they couldn't climb the impossible to climb tree? He pondered and pondered till one day Chuchu got a brainwave and hastily rushed to the king and asked for a chance to kill the predator. With no other person stepping forward for the challenge, the king obliged. Chuchu went and roasted a fleshy, juicy piece of meat and got a nice patch of fresh green grass. Chuchu then brought a goat and leashed her next to the fleshy, juicy piece of meat and brought a dog which he tied to a leash next to the nice patch of fresh green grass. "Eat," Chuchu commanded the two animals. "Come on, eat." The villagers exchanged amused looks, shaking their heads at each other and muttering, "There goes Chuchu again, always doing things like a madman." They chuckled as they walked off, chalking down Chuchu as an odd one. Meanwhile, up in the impossible-to-climb tree, the predator looked down at Chuchu, who was now getting fed up with the two animals on the leashes. "Eat," he would scream. I went to some trouble to get you to food, and you won't eat? Eat, ungrateful animals. Eat!" The dog sniffed the nice patch of fresh green grass and turned his nose, as if to say, "I'd rather starve." The goat, everyone knows. Goats eat everything, but even a goat has its limits. So the goat simply stood there, not even bothering with the fleshy, juicy piece of meat. Eat! Thought the predator. I have defeated them. I'm the most intelligent being. I've eluded all their traps. I've escaped their every person. Now they have given up and left the village idiot to catch me. Eat! 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 Screamed Chuchu, growing more and more exasperated. Look at that poor idiot, thought the predator. Doesn't he know that he's got it all backwards? The fleshy, juicy piece of meat should go to the dog, and the nice patch of fresh green grass should go to the goat. Chuchu screamed louder and louder, getting more and more frustrated as the animals ignored the food placed before them. And the more Chuchu got frustrated, the more the predator in the impossible-to-climb tree got frustrated, till the predator couldn't stand it any longer, got down from the impossible-to-climb tree and went to Chuchu. Listen, you idiot, you got it all backwards. Here, take the nice patch of fresh green grass and give it to the goat, and then take the fleshy, juicy piece of meat and give it to the... As the predator bent down to take the fleshy, juicy piece of meat, Chuchu took a big branch and killed the predator. The villagers all cheered and praised Chuchu, wondering how his backwards ways always seemed to somehow work for him. The king was extremely pleased and relieved, and so he kept his word, offering Chuchu half of his kingdom. Typical of Chuchu, he turned down the offer. Chuchu took a quick, surreptitious glance at the king's daughter, sitting next to her father, bowed and turned, and about to exit the king's compound. The king was puzzled. Who was this man that killed the elusive predator with simple but scheming methods? Who was this man that refused the offer of half the kingdom? I am Chuchu, your humble servant, your majesty. I had the honor to treat the princess for her burn wounds many years ago. The king recalled the terrible incident. His daughter was burned, her skin mutated into an unsightly variegation he had never gotten used to. It had been a terrible time, and only this young man's intervention saved his daughter. He felt doubly indebted to Chuchu. If it's not half the kingdom you want, then what is it? There must be something. Chuchu took another furtive glance at the princess, but this time the king did not miss it. My daughter? You love my daughter? I've loved her since I treated her burn wounds. Sadly, I'm but a slow villager. The king pondered. The man saved his daughter's life. The man fed the people in the time of poor harvest. And he showed crafty wisdom to kill the wily predator. On top of that, he professed to love his daughter. She would be lucky to have a husband like him. Seeing the king in deep silence, Chuchu mistook this as his profession of love for the princess being dismissed. What of him being a lowly villager? He began to take his leave. Wait, the princess spoke. Chuchu turned, hope springs gushing. If you accept my father's offer of half the kingdom, you'll no longer be but a lowly villager. Indeed, said the king. Indeed, agreed Chuchu, and so he happily accepted the king's offer of half the kingdom. Chuchu married the king's daughter in the most colorful ceremony the villagers had ever seen. And true to his style, the event was unconventional but memorable. And all the villagers sang, "Way, Chuchu, way! Way, Chuchu, way! Why, way, Chuchu, way! Batora mwana wama famu." And they partied all night long. The end.
Why
Chuchu, Chuchu, why wanna, 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 Chuchu, why wanna. Thank you very much, Ashe. Please, one more round of applause for Ashe. Thank you so much. According to the program, this is where we have a beautiful chat. And the chat for me was, to recognize literature, to recognize the role of folklore, folk tales in development of a nation. It's what I was looking for was an open discussion of the same. We have writers amongst us, we have publishers amongst us, we have social workers amongst us, doctors, musicians, and what have you. But why do we gravitate towards literature? What's the role of literature in developing a country? Why should we write folklore? Why are you guys here for a folklore book launch? So it's just a little chat. Anybody, if you have any questions also, I'm happy to provide answers as long as you're asking about either Chuchu or Hehelide. In general, if we are asking, say, for example, just writing and literature in general, then that question is for the general public. But otherwise, as a background, when my grandfather died, he left me only one thing, and he said it was deliberate for him. He didn't want to leave me land or money or his grocery store or his carpentry shop. He left me this book. It starts on page 9 and it ends on page 36. And it's been as dirty as this. I've had this book for the last 11 years. And in those 11 years, it's been this way. I've tried to preserve it. I've kept it in this format. I've discussed this book with some people in the audience, like my friend Muti. I've told him about this book. It was my first introduction to folk tales in Chitumbuka. So my grandfather grew up in Rumpi, in Nkhonjera, which is in the highlands of the Poga. And they were lucky in that area, I hope, that there was the Livingstonia mission in that area. And the Livingstonia mission had a print press. So they would print books, and this was one of the first Tumbuka books that was printed. It talks about things like fear. It talks about how people got to start praying for rain. And then there's a special section for folk tales of that time. And when I read it, I thought, oh, wow. I didn't know that I could express myself in my mother tongue in such a way. Because I had grown up reading Hansel and Gretel. I grew up reading Aesop's fables and such stories. And I'd read some Malawian folktales when I was in primary school and secondary school. But the fact of me sitting there and writing my own version of it, once I realized that, I don't think I want to stop. I think I've actually found my niche. I find myself slowly not writing short stories anymore. I used to write a lot of short stories. I used to try and get published as a novelist. But I'm not saying I won't. I just had a short story accepted last week. Yeah. But more and more, I'm going into research in folktales. I'm going into trying to publish my third book already, even though we're only launching my second one. But for me, the whole idea of a folktale is its brevity. Yeah. They're hardly 5 pages, 3, 4, 5 pages, and already you've got your story from beginning, the middle, and end. And at the end of it, you've actually got a moral, and you're learning a lesson. So, for example, the first story that I had told about Tawonga, I wanted to discuss this issue of cyberbullying, but I didn't know the way to get to it. And so I decided I'm going to talk about a princess who wants the hyena to cut off his tail. And the very same body part that she was castigating or denigrating is the same body part that actually saves her. So sometimes people will look at Taddja and say, Tadja's got a big nose. They'll look at Muti and say, Muti's graying. They say these things. Oh, it's Q. Okay, sorry, Muti's not graying, Q's graying.
Nice, the violence. The violence. Wow.
Yeah, so, but for me it's the brevity. It's very short, very, very, very particular to the people. Sometimes you would know who the people are just from the folktales. The Luo in Kenya have very, very particular folktales. They are very, very clever in using folktales to speak politics. And that's one thing I learned. I thought, okay, if we wanted to talk about deforestation, and we wanted to talk to children about deforestation, can we start telling them, oh, listen, in Mulanje Mountain, in 1997, there was 2 million trees of Mulanje cedar, but this year, in 2024, there's only 7 trees of Mulanje cedar. I don't know if you give that data to a child who's 6, 7, 8 years old, they would grasp the immensity of the situation. But if you tell them that, in the olden days, there was a little bird, and her name was Sisi, and Sisi had her babies, and the babies were in a big tree, and one day a bee came, and the bee said, listen, Sisi, can you please save me? I would like to stay with you just for a few days, because there were these creatures, they came into my tree, and they had fire, and all they wanted was to take my honey. And Sisi says, no, you can't. I know the creatures you're talking about, the humans. And when humans taste honey, they don't want to leave it. They'll go to great lengths to get the honey. But Sisi is a good bird, and so she lets the bee live with her. But one day the humans, they hear the bees, and the bees are too high up there. And the humans say, what do we do? And the other human says, let's cut the tree. And the other human says, oh, wow, you're a genius. Let's cut the tree. And so they do cut the tree, and Sisi's nest with her hatchlings, they're gone. The humans have taken them. If you put it that way and you realize that, actually cutting down the tree is not right. It doesn't just kill the tree, it kills the birds that are nesting in the tree. It kills the bees that are, hiving in that tree. And maybe that way the child will learn the lesson easier, instead of in a pedantic, more of a, banging it down the throat kind of way. And that's why I got attracted to folktales. For me, it's always been a question of hunting for the best folktale now that I can write about, so that by the time I'm getting to 100 folktales, there's not one of them that's similar to the last one. There's not one of them that's repeating the story that I had told in the last one, and there's not one of them that's just regurgitating a lesson from the past that had already been told. So it's going to be a collaborative effort. So I would like to say thank you very much to Kweza for hosting us. We would like to get partners to help us with research. When I say we, I don't write the books by myself. My publisher is Zikani Publishers. The Zikani Publishers are based in Blantyre, and they have published both Hey Holiday and Chuchu. Yeah. They were supposed to be here, but as I mentioned earlier, today had been hectic, and I had called them to say maybe it may be good that you shouldn't come, because Zikani, they're based in Blantyre, they were supposed to drive all the way to Lilongwe. So I hope for the next session that we'll have, hopefully that we'll have another session at Kweza. Maya, will we have another session at Kweza? All right. For the next session, we will have our editor. They're represented by Mr. Wilned Zoto, Wilned Zoto Hara. He's a young man, but they've got a good thing going on. Their catalog is growing. They've published books also for the Malawi Writers Union. They published Mandevu and other stories, a collection of stories from young budding writers. So it's good. We should also support Zikani publishers. So yeah, it's a discussion. For the few stories that you've heard from Chuchu, and the few stories you know yourselves in folklore, the floor is open. If you have any questions, please bombard me. But if you have anything to say in terms of Malawian folklore or folklore in the world and how it can contribute to the development of the nation, please.
I've got the microphone here. Just a comment, and first of all, congratulations and thank you for choosing Kweza to do this. As we're moving forward, we are hoping that we can solidify this partnership and create a space where you can come and even workshop with kids. We're hoping to have a program called Kweza Kids, so you can come here and just have that direct interaction with kids, young people, and then maybe like for the whole day, and then host this storytelling in the evening. Let's get the kids to start writing folklore. Exactly. It's not just for us who've grown up with these stories. So we're very open to that collaboration. So consider this your home for your program. Let's create a culture of storytelling. Let's bring it back into So we're very open. The team is there as I am stepping down. Solely Pebani.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will, Muti, always. Yeah, always.
Of course. Thanks, Taddja, for congrats and order for launching this book.
Thank you.
I've got two questions for you. Number one is I'm curious to know how you find your folktales. If you're at liberty to share that info.
Absolutely.
The second one is I'm curious. There are a few books on Malawi which have been declared by scholars across the world as being so important that they've contributed to civilization as we know it. And one of the titles is Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Nkhonjera language.
Okay.
To my knowledge, I'm the only one in Malawi who's got a copy. It came out in 1893.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah. My question to you is, this book was written by T.C. Scott, who built the St. Michael's Church in Blantyre. And it's one of the earliest books on Chichewa as a language as we know it, or Manganja, which is a version of Chichewa. He sings praises of Manganja as the language. He even says, the language is so beautiful, it belongs in the realms of angels. It's one of the most positive books on Malawi culture you can find. My question to you is, I don't know if you got some input, but how come others see much more value in the way we express ourselves than we do? I don't know if you got a take on that.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. So for how I identify the stories, first is research. The research is physical research. We go into the different districts. We meet the oldies, if you want to call them that. We meet grandmothers, grandfathers, old people, and we chat with them and ask them, how were you told about, say for example, respecting your elders? It's not something you learn in school. It's not something that you have to go and get a standard education for, to see an old lady and then you offer her your seat, or to offer to carry her heavy luggage. How do you learn that? How do you learn compassion? What happens in this tradition or in this culture or in this village when a chief is sick or when there is a firstborn child? So such moments and such research, it leads to you discovering that there's almost always some kind of rite or some kind of ceremony for these events: a death, a birth, marriage, coming of age and things like that. And that's when I realized that there's always a story for every one of these events, and these stories are actually designed to give us the lessons, to give us the knowledge that our ancestors had, that our people had. So for example, in the story that Ashe was reading, Chuchu plants this, he calls it a magical plant, and it's green and it's spiky. I'm basically talking about aloe vera. Yeah, but an aloe vera it's not a common plant in Malawi. But I think if I put it in the folktale and somebody reads about it, they will begin to recognize it. I got this idea from, I mentioned the Luo culture. So in my research, I also researched through reading. I'm reading what other cultures are talking about in terms of their folklore, like Anansi the spider. It's a very, very popular story. Why did it get that popular? I'm reading Steve Chimombo. I'm reading, I don't know how you pronounce Professor Scofields or something like that. Sophia's, yeah. I'm reading his work and I'm trying to digest what has he covered so far on the Malawian spectrum and what are the stories that haven't been told. So, for example, Hey Helide has Kalidima. And in Malawi, Kalidima is a popular story. Ndine shimbalame Kalidima, chakunyanja, ndima lirima, liriri, Kalidima sole kunya, Kalidima. It's very, very popular. But with Chuchu, I got those stories that some of them are popular. Like I mentioned, the Fulu and Kalulu. It's a very popular one. You don't have to do research on that one, but why retell it? So I'll retell it because I want my own version of how a slow plodding tortoise can beat a bouncy bunny in a foot race. And so I imagine that the tortoise cheated, took like a sleeping pill and gave it to the hare, and the hare slept. And so that's how the tortoise won it. So it's a question of, I'm a creative. I give myself a creative license on that story, and then I tell it. So yeah, it's mostly research. Mostly, we get the regular ones where there's an orphan, and the orphan's mother from the grave is feeding the orphan. These are very, very popular stories, and some of them I run away from them. But the research is, the first book was humans interacting with humans. The second one, humans interacting with nature. The third one will be humans trying to identify their origins. So humans and deities, and humans and their belief in God, and humans seeking their origin. That will be the third one. Yeah. In terms of the essence of the book, in terms of the importance of the book, I'm biased. I don't know too many Malawian local languages. I know Chichewa, Chitonga, Chiao, and Chitumbuka. And because I've lived with my grandfather, I know a lot more Chitumbuka than the other languages. And whenever I hear a word that I didn't think would have a Tumbuka version of that word, I'm shocked at how deep the language is. And then it's a reminder of how much we have lost in terms of knowledge of our languages. It's like if there were trees here before Kweza was constructed, and those trees were cut down, and we never ever get to see those trees again. There's a loss of nomenclature on those biomes. We will never remember that tree. If it's a Msuku tree, it's cut off. Over 100 years, we'll forget a Msuku tree. And in Tumbuka publications, like books like this, you realize that a lot of knowledge has been lost that way. Not translation, just a loss of a word. Yeah. Sometimes the loss of the word comes because, I'll give the example of the Tumbuka. When the Ngoni came, they integrated with Tumbuka and they learned the Tumbuka language, but they had their own words. And some of those words merged into Tumbuka culture. So while a typical Tumbuka would say Nkuya, kukaya, a Ngoni person would say nihamba kukaya, but we will understand each other. As an example, somebody was saying, they're not languages, they're dialects. Chichewa and Chitumbuka, they're almost the same. So I stepped back and I thought, how are they almost the same? When if you say kupuntwa, for example, ndapuntwa, in Chitumbuka is kukwara, there's absolutely no similarity between the words. So how can you say the languages are similar? It's actually very different. I speak a little bit of Spanish and I know Portuguese because my mother used to speak Portuguese. And I'll tell you those two languages are more similar than Chichewa is with Chitumbuka. So perhaps he was saying that realizing the depth of the words in Chimanganja. Because they were coming in the 1800s, maybe even in the 1700s, when other settlers weren't yet here, and people were speaking predominantly their language. And perhaps maybe that's where the beauty of it is. But I would love to I know it's a treasure, you don't let it out, but I would love to read that. I would love to read that book, please, and just discover. But for me, I think it's once you reach that level and you recognize a language, the words in that language, the depth of the words, and the fact that the knowledge transfer, then you recognize. But in terms of just a particular language, the beauty of a language, or one particular book, there's one specific Malawian book, I wouldn't point at it, I wouldn't say. I would probably say a short story like Malawian Blues would be a classic if we had been published and given to the masses. But, yeah, I don't know. It's not just a question to me. I've answered my part.
I'm just going to be continuing with this discussion that we're having. I don't know about the book that he talked about, but if it was written in Malawian language and it's that old, it would be nice if we could find a way to get it republished as part of the history of Malawian language. But the other question I wanted now just came to me is, have you considered having these books in the original languages as well, to print them, to publish them in Chitumbuka, if it is from that region, or in Chichewa, so that people will have more access. The first day we met, we discussed this.
Yes.
The access to anything that's written in one's own language always improves the chance of that person being able to read and wanting to read. It might even make them want to learn a new language so that now they will have access to other books. But first, the love of reading has to come from somewhere. And most people might not be growing up speaking the English language, or they might even speak it, but not to the level that they can read and really fully understand and enjoy a book. As you remember, I was telling you the reason I fell in love with books was because many books were translated into my language, Amharic, when I was a kid. Although I was in the village, I still had access to books in my own language.
Muti, he was telling me they were reading Russian classics in Amharic.
Yes, I mean, at the time that I grew in Ethiopia, it was a socialist country. So the government wanted us to understand communism. So as much of it was translated into our language. But on top of that, there were a lot of fiction books as well that were translated from English to our language. And that gave me the opportunity to read one book, and then I fell in love. Usually it takes one good book to make a person fall in love with reading. So if you could get these books also published in the original language, and also in Chichewa, I think, because it's the national language that most people here speak. That's my suggestion.
I'll answer very quickly because I wanted to throw this question to Muti for reasons which I'll explain in the answer. So for example, like the first question that Muti asked me was, how do you get your stories? So I do research, and the research takes me to different districts. For example, in this book, there's a story from Zalanyama, which is in the central. There's a story from Poka, which is in the north. There's a story from Chitiba, which is northernmost tip. There's a story from Sanje. So that means I would have to, in one book, I would have a Chichewa story, a Chitumbuka story, a Tonga story, which is a great idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's clever. But I wanted to ask, in terms of publishing, how do you think that would work, Muti?
So let me just, I'll be quick as well. Your point actually sort of ties in with my question, where the language that others consider belonging in the realms of angelic spaces, we don't see it. That's my point, and that was my question was why? So Amharic is interesting because you guys embrace your language almost too much. If you fly with Ethiopian Airlines, they'll spend 5 minutes explaining something, and then they spend like maybe a minute explaining the same thing in English. And you're like, wait a minute, but But anyway, the opposite is true in Malawi. So if you do a book in Chichewa, yes, it might potentially be read by many people, but most readers, or some readers, prefer to read English to Chichewa. That's why it gets a bit tricky. This is why now the politics of language in Malawi manifest themselves in a very confusing way. Because the masses do speak in Chichewa, but the people who want to read, if you go to the National Library of Malawi, whether in Blantyre, Lilongwe, Mzuzu, most of the books are in English. There'll be a small section of books in Chichewa. There'll be a corner somewhere.
Malawiana?
Yeah. And if you ask them, they'll tell you that, look, the interest of people, wanting to read in Chichewa. It's so, part of it is also because Chichewa is, in a sense, for readers, some readers anyways, can be associated to not being educated, which is a very big stigma in Malawi. So this is right now, the politics of language manifest themselves in a very interesting way. So for me, as a publisher, first and foremost, I would love to do most books in Chichewa, but I know getting the market might be a bit tricky. As opposed to say Amharic, which almost the whole of Ethiopia, or the majority, they embrace that language. So it's a bit different in that sense. Yeah.
I wanted to just say that it's not like there's no publications in the local languages. We used to joke that the only book in Chitumbuka is a Bible. But that's just because the Bible is the most printed book. And so we have access to the Bible. But if I asked, for example, my friend here, Fide, to say, what was the last Tumbuka book that you read? I don't, but like one of his friends is a writer, and one of the first Tumbuka books I read was Shawa's book. Yeah, it's written in Chitumbuka, but he hasn't read it. And this person we're talking about is a very good friend of his. So there's this thing also, maybe because we don't write much in Chitumbuka, we don't get to publish much. I have a book in Chitumbuka which is on Amazon, but nobody's buying it. I keep on going to my agent and ask to say, are there any dollars in my account? He says, you still have 8 copies sold. And I wouldn't even, this is the point. I have friends in the diaspora. They say, oh, we want to read our own works, we want to read in our own language, right? And you share the link to my book. It's like, okay, this is my book. It was published in 2014. This is 10 years later, and it still hasn't reached 1,000 items bought. So maybe, I think it's what Muti referred to say, if you're reading or writing in your local language, in your indigenous language, it smacks a little bit of uneducated, which is stupid. How can you be able to read if you're uneducated? Yeah. What do you think, Muti, a book like that with Chichewa in there, another story, or just one language? That would mean a lot of money, because now you have to produce copies in Chichewa, copies in Chitumbuka. Yeah. There was a program, there was an initiative like that, but not for printing, more for broadcast news. They would read news in Chisena, Chitumbuka, and things like that. And yeah, no, I appreciate it. It worked. I thought it worked, and it actually, for me, it helped me talk to other people, because I would then know their language from the news. Yeah. So that, up until today, I know if I say Zempangwa, Waguwalanga, it's the news. Here's the news, read by this. So I started learning a different language just by listening to news. Yeah.
And that is coming to what you have just said. By the way, my name is Foster Benjamin. I'm Vice President for Malay Writers Union, representing my president, Shadik Chukoti. I just wanted to concur with what Mut had just said regarding, he said that most people these days prefer English to Chichewa, especially when it comes to books. I just want to share my experience. One day I was in the library in Mulanj. I'm coming from that side. So I wanted to read something in the vernacular. So I moved heaven and earth in that library, searching for a Chichewa book, and I could not find it. What I found was a newspaper, Bumalado. Of course, I read it. I was happy, but I was looking for a book, not the newspaper. So, coming to what the gentleman just said, that a lot of people prefer English to Chichewa when it comes to publications. It's not like we don't like Chichewa, we like it, but most people prefer English, yeah.
There are some people who are just arriving. Basically, welcome to the launch of Chuchu. We've had a few stories told. We've had one story, the title story is Chuchu, that was read by our guest Ashe Nafi. Now we are just discussing the role of folktales in the development of a nation. It's an open discussion. Please.
Hi. Thank you very much for presenting those two stories. They were very engaging. I enjoyed them. I am just new to Malawi. I've just been here 3 weeks. I'm just visiting for a short time. But I am a writer in my country. I'm from Canada. And I'm very interested to know, I've been looking for bookstores in Lilongwe, and I see there are very few bookstores.
Here.
Okay, I will connect with you.
Yes.
But I want to know, okay, this is a lovely book with lovely stories.
Thank you.
And I want to know, how will you market it now? How will you persuade parents to buy this book so they will read it with their children? Because this is obviously wonderful stories for parents to read with their children. How do you market in this country, your books, your literature?
For the first one, my apologies. For the first one, I used nostalgia. The first one is very, very nostalgic, because these are very, very popular stories. So I know that once somebody hears Kajitsa, they figure, no, I want to hear this. And so they will find that it's the same story, but I've put my own, spin to it. So it's nostalgia in the sense that I know that a parent will want this book for their child, because they know this story, and they know that there isn't much else where these stories are being told. And so this is a chance for them to sit down and sing it to their children. But I was lucky with the first one, because there was a musical album already. And so the people that knew the album, once they heard that this came out, they ordered the books. And I used a lot of Facebook. In the sense that if you're a friend of mine and you bought the book, and I would force you to pause with me, and then share those. And once we share those, more people wanted to buy the book. And as an example, there are people that coming to Malawi and maybe spending 2-3 weeks and going back. I always encourage to say, this is a perfect present for you when you're going out of Malawi. And so that way people would say, okay, I want 4 copies, I want 5 copies. That's largely how we've marketed it. But I have also managed to put it in 3 selling outlets. One in Zuzu, one here in Lilongwe, and one in Blantyre. Yeah, but honestly, we're not selling as much as we should be selling, because perhaps we focus more on the writing to get the book out there, but then we don't develop the proper marketing strategies so that our books can actually, let's say for example there's 20 million Malawians. Out of those 20 million, how many are literate enough to read this book? So let's say maybe for example 7 million. Out of those 7 million, how do I reach the 7 million that I can sell to half of them 3.5 million copies of this book? I don't have the algorithm for that. But I would love to hear from you. Write it or write it.
It's a big challenge in every country to sell books.
Yeah, but still, how do you sell yours?
I'm using Facebook.
Yeah. LinkedIn. Yeah. Apart from putting it at Jump.
Yeah, exactly.
What else can we do apart from putting it at Jump?
Kids, moms and dads. We launch in the afternoon, that free in the afternoon, next to a cafe. And you invite the mom to bring the kids. The mom will be sitting there, the kids will be listening to you.
Right.
I was going to say that I think you've got a huge advantage as being a person on the stage as well. And those 2 things, your marketing strategy is your storytelling. You know, that is your marketing strategy. Those 2 things, not even like selling, say, physical copies here, but if you, for example, you're live streaming, if you get to an international audience and there's links to your Amazon links, yeah, and that's been my experience every time I perform, especially outside, and there's my Amazon sales, they go up somehow. So I think the more you perform, the more you sell.
Yeah.
But just linking those 2 now and making sure that every performance, is leading to book sales. You've got a huge advantage, because not a lot of writers can, sit on a stage and connect and tell stories and be engaging. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Yes.
But I do understand the fatigue.
Time.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
I am loving the discussion so far. I just wanted to make this point. When it comes to the role of, I think, folklore to the development of a country, one thing I admire very much about other countries is they're always very true to their identity. If you go anywhere around the world and you ask, what is something about you that truly shows where you're from, or something about your country, they will have something to show. Apart from our language, I don't know much about what I could say really showcases my being Malawian, quite frankly. And this is just honest opinion.
Smiling faces.
There's actually things about that, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
I'm going to give an example of, I went hiking with my friends this morning, and when we got to the top of the hill, we sat down and talked. I was describing, a game that we used to do when we were kids, where, and it was mostly played by girls, where they tie wrappers around their waist, and they stand in circles, and they sing their songs and they dance, and the most applause for the one who dances the best, and so on and so forth. I had to come back home and go to my mother and ask her in the presence of my nephews and my nieces. And I start describing the dance, and she goes, "Are you talking about Chiteliana?"
Yeah.
And it was games that I had played with my sisters and my cousins when I was younger, but I couldn't even remember a name.
Right, yeah.
Literature has a lot more to do with learning a language, because that is the most basic way you communicate. Folklore ties so much into origins and background and identity. When he said, you've got the power because one of your greatest assets is your storytelling. Before we officially started, you were explaining one of the stories, or was it just when we started? And I heard the song, and it took me back to when I was a child, because yes, I know Kachisa Kalila Mande, but I had never heard that story for almost more than 10 years, actually.
Yeah.
And I hear it, and the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, I wish I could tell my nephews and nieces that, like those stories. But then I can't remember them.
Yeah.
But like there's a book, and there's someone who wrote such book. It is a very beautiful idea that he's trying to, create Kweza Kids, where we're not only giving the children a reason to want to read, but in doing so, we're also giving them a place to, go back to who they actually are, where they came from. Because I didn't have those kinds of chances,
Right.
You could utilize that and have your books available there, because I would imagine, as my kids in my house grow, and they hear these stories, the first book, as you said, is very nostalgic. But then from that nostalgia comes the question, but then what else can I learn about where I come from? And that's something that I never had. But if we're raising our children to love to read, but as we're teaching them to love to read, we're also finding a way to remind them always, look back to where you're coming from. Like Chuchu, he found ways that everyone looked at and was like, what is this man doing? But the ways that worked.
Yeah.
You can teach children new things, but you can also teach them to remain authentic to who they are through the folklore. And that is one thing that that makes folklore very important. We're keeping our identity. Because it has been said multiple times, a lot of people prefer to read in English. I can barely even speak Chichewa. I was embarrassed when I wanted to find work, voice acting, and I was asked, how good is your Chichewa? And I stayed silent.
Yeah.
And I am born, raised Jewa. Both my parents are Jewa,
Yeah.
and I cannot speak that. Now imagine how beautiful it is when you're in a bus and you hear Tumbuka speaking, and they have an entire conversation without a single word in English, and it's all Tumbu. It's a beautiful thing. You don't automatically assume they can't speak English or they can't speak another language.
No.
But you see them and immediately you know that's a Tumbuka person,
Yeah.
that's a Tonga person, that is Ngoni. And in that, you enrich yourself, because I know where I came from. There is nothing to stop me from learning something else, because no matter how much I learn, I am grounded in my identity, because folklore helped me know about that, and I found ways to retain that. But I learned something new, and it's a powerful tool in itself.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Tawonga. I remember the first time we met,
Yes.
and we were talking about football.
Yes.
And I remember thinking, how does this guy know so much about football? I just want to say, if I had half the charisma that you have, I would indeed be a charismatic man myself.
Charisma.
So,
Thank you.
I have a question. I am really intrigued that you show a few pages from a book that your grandfather gave to you. And you also mentioned that the third of your series will be humans meeting with ancestry. Now this I am interested in. I'm interested in the impact of your grandfather and why you are now moving towards ancestry for the third one. And so, yes, please, dig deep, share.
I am very, very fascinated by chameleons. Very. It's chameleons and dragonflies. Yeah, it's almost an obsession. So chameleons feature a lot in origin stories. So that's what prompted the research to say, why the chameleon? And then from that research, I realized it's not just the chameleon, it's so many other different animals, except maybe the chameleon and lizard story was popularized, so much. So that's for me, it's it's not a question of seeking God. It's not a question of trying to find a divine entity. It's a question of, we're here, and at some point we won't be here, but we were there. So what sustained us from there to here, and what will sustain us from here to there? So if I can find that, I think the stories will come out beautiful. Yeah. But I wanted to hear also a little bit about your book. What prompted you to write the book? What's the title of the book, and why is it coming out now?
Yes, thank you for asking, and there's nothing like being put on the spot, right? So, firstly, let me say, Unakabo Kushe, thank you for the opportunity we had in here. I know say none of you understand what I say, because the dialect I'm just speaking in is from West Africa, not from Malawi. I grew up in Africa. I have an African heritage also. And I keep coming back. And I reflect on the story that you just told. And I could feel goosebumps when you were singing, because I remember as a small boy at school, sitting underneath a mango tree, participating in these songs. And that was my first language, Creole from West Africa. And so it resonates with me when you hear these songs, these historical moments that take you back. This is important. So I'm here because I see and feel the importance of what you are doing. Whatever draws you to do this, keep doing it. Because of course I enjoy the readings, I enjoy the charisma. So much so that I also decided to write many, many years ago. Where did it begin? It began in a cafe in Belgrade, in former Yugoslavia, where I started to look around at the different culture that I was observing, and I started to make some notes. And then I got to the airport, the Nikola Tesla airport in Belgrade, and then my flight was delayed. And I thought, I enjoyed throwing some words together. So I went and got some paper, I took out my pen, and I started to write. Now that was in 2006. I managed to publish the first book in 2021. It's on paperback.
Yeah.
And because it was in Belgrade, it's called the Balkans Protocol. So from 2006 to 2021, it took me that time to just keep writing, to keep evolving, to keep writing, to keep evolving. And then one day I wondered why I was writing. And I decided that I would publish, because it's not about the story that I am telling, it's about the personalities behind some of these stories. And the stories sometimes just evolve. So the Balkans Protocol is one of 3 books that I decided to write. Similar situation to you. After some years have passed on paperback, because I am old-fashioned, I have celebrated my 40th birthday about 20 times now. I'm losing count. So I decided that I would try the e-book, because I spent so much time in so many of these countries where the opportunity to get, you had problems looking for a bookshop. I also have encountered that problem, and I am very happy to meet some people here from the literary part of the world, where I am looking forward to engaging with you and exchanging with you. Because as I listen to you talk, Tawonga, I have in the back of my mind now an idea for a book that I will write.
All right, thank you. I demand 2% for, because I was in the moment of conception, so yeah.
Oh, please. It will be more than 2%, because I would like you to be a bigger part
Thank you.
than just 2%, because your inspiration is already what has put this idea in my head.
I appreciate that.
But let me tell you a bit about the Balkans Protocol. My background is 30 years of policing around the world. I've been to a few countries, but predominantly I was policing in the United Kingdom. I worked with Scotland Yard for 10 years, and I did part of my service with Special Branch. I spent 10 years with Special Branch. So my character is a detective from Scotland Yard.
Right.
But I have traveled a lot, so I decided that it would just be another boring detective story that a Scotland Yard detective is doing detective work in the UK. So I've decided that my character will be somebody who, by chance, happens to be abroad when a case presents itself. And when they say you can take the person out of policing, but you can never take policing out of the person. If you are drawn to policing and detecting, it's part of your nature. Like you are a researcher. That researcher can never be taken away from you. It's in your blood. So my story is about a detective who finds himself in the Balkans and gets drawn into an investigation out of his control, beyond his control, and he is forced to get involved. And there is a book 2, which moves from Europe to Africa, because I felt that it's time to replicate my African heritage inside my stories. And book 3 is already titled, and probably about 30% in. Book 3 is titled The Freetown Connection. Because my childhood was in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And so the third book will be called The Freetown Connection, that connects book 1 with book 3. And book 2 is currently with a publisher who keeps advising me on some editorial side. So I feel the joy of writing, but there is also a pain that comes with writing, right?
Absolutely.
Ash, we've been exchanging today, and this is the second time we meet, and we bond because we share a passion for words coming together.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure the lady there also will feel that, the bond that makes us want to string words together, and you have a true talent for this. When I was listening to how you were reading these words, Ash, how you pull these words together.
Thank you.
In English, which is not your mother tongue, that makes it fascinating, even for me. So anyway, I leave it there. The Balkans Protocol is available on Kindle, Amazon, ebooks, and hopefully book 2, which is called The Prague Deception, detective story.
It's set in Prague in Czech Republic.
Yes, Prague in the Czech Republic. It's set in that part of Europe. And then moves to Africa. I'm not going to explain. It needs to be read, to understood. But once you read it, you will understand it. And then book 3 is really the first part. Book 3 is book 1, really, because that's my heritage, and it goes back to that. And what made this child grow up into a policeman in Europe. So I leave it there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
But really, really, I want to thank you, tenki, as they say in Sierra Leone. Tenki, for the inspiration and for these ideas that you are generating inside my head for another book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Masauko. Deep in the gorges of Mpatamanga, where the land was harsh and the weather even harsher, there lived a man who was miserably poor. The poor man's name was Masauko. And he was so poor that he only had one piece of cloth that he wore, itself weathered, beaten and battered into tatters by Father Time. Masauko had no farm to grow crops. He had no goats, no sheep, no cows, no chicken, no pigeons. Masauko had no skills to turn to. He had no skills to turn around his fortunes and have a better life. Masauko was so poor that while every man had 2, 3, or even 4 wives, he had just one little wife and she was childless. This distressed both poor Masaoko and his little wife terribly. If they had no child, what was the point of life? Masaoko's wife would gladly have given up on life had it not been for Masaoko's eternal optimism. Despite being miserably poor and without a child, Masaoko was always hopeful of a good life, and he ceaselessly encouraged his wife not to lose hope. In the entire land, Masaoko had only one friend, Ntiraguiri. Or so he thought, Masaoko. The truth was, Ntiraguiri only pretended to be Masaoko's friend, but in his heart, deep down, he did not really like Masaoko. Ntiraguiri was rich, he had 3 wives, yet he was never happy. He was always wondering how Masaoko could maintain such a positive demeanor despite being so miserably poor. So in reality, Masaoko had nobody to love him but himself and his poor little childless wife. Masaoko was a highly spiritual man, and he always beseeched the Maker through his ancestors to give him and his little childless wife a better life. Every morning when he woke up, he thanked the Maker for a new day, and every night before going to sleep, Masaoko entreated the Maker for the gift of life, to make his little wife happy. After a long, long, patient wait, the Maker told Masaoko that he was ready to help him. The Maker told Masaoko that he would send 3 wonderful creatures to visit Masaoko. The 3 creatures were called child, money, and patience. However, there was a catch. Masaoko would only be allowed to keep only one of these wonderful creatures, and the other creatures would have to return to the Maker. And so the 3 creatures set off on the long and arduous journey from the Maker to Mparamanga, to the house of the miserably poor man and his little wife. One day, on their journey, the 3 creatures came to a large river flooded with rushing rainwater. The water was so deep and cold, but Patience went first and easily crossed to the other side. Then the child wanted to cross, and then the child turned to Money and said, "Look, I'm just a child. I haven't learned how to swim yet. Plus, I'm small and I'm weak. You are big and you're strong and you're influential. Please carry me across to the other side." And Money looked at the child, appalled. "Are you out of your mind? You insolent child. Don't you know me? I am Money. I make people rich. I'm the one who makes the demands. It is you who should carry me across to the other side." And so they argued back and forth, fighting for a long time. Eventually, Patience came back for them and carried both of them across. And they proceeded to Masaoko's hut. Masaoko was very pleased and honored with the visit, and he asked his little wife to prepare whatever they had in the food for the visitors to eat. When time came for Masaoko to make a decision on which creature to pick, he found himself unable to choose. So he decided to seek advice from his little wife. "Wife, what do you think we should do?" "Are you kidding me? It's a no-brainer, isn't it?" she exclaimed. "We are miserably poor. Money is what we need the most. If you choose the child, for example, what are we going to feed the child? If you choose Patience, what good will that do us? Don't be so dense. Choose Money." Yet Masaoko was not totally convinced, so he decided to consult his friend Ntiraguiri. Ntiraguiri was not happy that these 3 wonderful creatures had visited his friend and not him. So instead, he thought, "I don't want Masaoko to have money, and I don't want him to have a child either." So he pretended to think deeply, and then he said, "Listen, you know what? You should choose Patience. I'm told Patience is a virtue. If you choose the child, you will have no money to feed it. If you choose Money, and yet you and your wife have no child, all the money will be lost to strangers when you die. The best thing for you to do is choose Patience. Patience is a virtue. you will be a virtuous man. Masauko was somehow convinced, so he returned home and chose patience. His little wife was livid with anger when Patience settled down to live with them, while Money and the child bade their farewells and started off going back to the maker. But somehow Masauko had this feeling of contentment. On the way back, the Money and the child arrived once again at that big river, and once again the child began to argue about who was going to carry the other across the rushing waters. They quarreled for a longer time, even this time, without a solution, till after some time the child said, "You know what? Both you and I are incapable of crossing the river, so I've just had an idea. Let's simply return to that poor man's house and live with him and his little wife." You know what? For a child, you have pretty good ideas. Let's go. And so the two creatures returned to Masauko's hut. With the child and Money, Masauko and his little wife's lives now changed for the better. Now they lived in a bigger and much better house, and Masauko and his little wife were ever jolly, a song always on their lips, until Akuwiri never visited Masauko again. Thank you.
All right, another round of applause. Another round of applause. Thank you so much, Taddja. Thank you so much. Tonight, this beautiful, beautiful copy, this beautiful compilation of stories, beautiful Malawian stories, beautiful culture, is going for just 25,000 per copy. But 5 of these copies are on auction tonight. They're going on auction, and the proceeds for this auction are going to a charity called SHADE, which is Sustainable Health Advocacy Development Education. And they deal with health education. And so tonight we'd like to open the floor for those that would like to get these 5 copies. One of those 5 copies, maybe all of them. You never know. But we'd like to open the floor for anyone who would like to get this beautiful copy on auction. I don't know if we have anyone in the audience tonight, but I do also know that we are live online, and so if you're at home, you'd like to get one copy for yourself at 25,000 kwacha, please contact this number 099-195-1025. 099-195-1025, and you can get yourself this beautiful, beautiful copy. But do I have any takers in the audience tonight for this beautiful copy on auction for any amount in the audience? Above 25,000, that is. Do I have any takers?
Actually do.
Wonderful. Oh, sorry. Wonderful. We do have a taker here, over there, and how much for, sir? Wonderful. Kweza is getting one for 100,000 kwacha. Do I have somebody else in the audience that would like to get this beautiful copy? Anybody else?
I wanted to, sorry, I
Yes,
almost
please.
interrupted you. I wanted to clarify. So I went to school with my friend right there in that green shirt, that guy, this guy, in the green shirt, this guy here, the one who's looking behind.
Muti?
Yeah, we were in school together. I studied public health, so I'm more of a scientist when it comes to school. That's why I gravitate to research. But in terms of the public health, I work mostly as a consultant because I would like to focus mostly on the arts. So I work in film, I work in theater, I work in music and creative writing. But professionally, when you meet me, you will probably meet me conducting a project in public health, giving awareness in health education, say for example, sexual reproductive health, cancer, or cholera. So there's this organization, SHADE. They are new, and they asked me to lead their organization in terms of them getting registered and getting their work recognized in early childhood development and health education. So that's the reason why I told them that we'll try to auction the book. There were some people that were supposed to come for that auction, actually. They're not here. And those proceeds were now going to go to SHADE, Sustainable Health, Advocacy, Development, and Education. I'm working with them pro bono. They're not paying because they're new and they're young, and so I thought one of the pro bono ways was to sell the book, 5 copies, and give the proceeds to them. So thank you very much, Kweza. We really, really appreciate that.
Wonderful. At the end, we will have an opportunity to get one of these copies at the back for 25,000 kwacha. 25,000 kwacha, and Taddja will be able to sign them for us. So please do stay and engage at the end for that. Right now, I'd like to call up someone who is not new to the creative industry. He's an artist himself, and I'd like to call him up to give a speech. He's calling it a thank you note, but I'm calling it a speech. He is the special advisor to the President of Malawi on creative industries, and he is the founder of Kweza. So I'd like to call up Q Malowezi tonight.
In this capacity, Q. Not here to speak for long, just to thank everyone for coming through, and also a special recognition to our uncle Alfred Msadala, if those who didn't know that he was here. Welcome to Kweza, Uncle Atu, and the rest of the writers that have come through. It's always amazing to see artists supporting artists. I think one of the most important things we can do as a creative community is be each other's audience, and then the rest of the people will follow. So also to acknowledge all the work that Muti is doing at Jambo Market. If you see the events, please go. Not just the events, but it's an amazing bookstore with an amazing collection of Malawian books, so please visit. And I think we need to really, really open up and start doing a lot more collaborations in terms of the spaces, because collaboration is the way to go. So thank you very much once again for coming through. And Taddja, I hope, no, not I hope, now I'm going to use my other powers as special advisor to the president. I am directing you and Kweza to have a solid program in this space, especially for kids.
We're definitely,
you know, so that you come up on stage, you tell the stories, and then we get to hear what these kids are also writing, what they are capable of, you know, to see the spin that they can put on our folklore. It'll be amazing to see. So thank you for, you know, being very open to the idea. We talked about it, so this I don't even have to sell it to you. Yeah, we've been in each other's lives for a very long time. I think the three of us, we go way back. So we're really, really looking forward to that collaboration with Kweza Kids once we launch the program here. To our amazing musicians here, you added so much, an amazing dimension to, you know, storytelling. Thank you very much. And we're also looking forward for him having a jazz, an acoustic jazz session here at Kweza.
Yeah, sure.
He's already been here with his orchestra, so yeah. Thank you very much. You know, when you're not busy soldiering. Yeah, he's a military man. Huh? I know, huh? Like, he looks so, you know. No, he's a dangerous guy. I'm just getting, you know, grips with myself because, you know, when we hear special branch in Malawi, it's different here. With our history, yeah, you understand, yeah. But it's amazing to see, you know, for you to be here and to share your story, your experience. So thank you very much for gracing this space. Thank you for visiting as well, all the way from Canada. Yeah, weather, ooh, nice. Yeah, but thank you very much for coming through. Visit Jambo Market, get as many books as possible as gifts, and for yourself, and share with the people when you go back there. To everyone else, again, thank you for visiting Kweza. After this, we just play some music. The team is here. We'll show you around what we have in the space if you want to go for a tour. And hope to be seeing you on a much regular basis when we increase our programming. Thank you very much and have a good night.